Mike Thompson was having a perfectly normal Thursday afternoon at Joe's Bar and Grill when the world went to hell. He sat on his favorite bar stool, watching the baseball game on TV, while nursing his third beer of the day. The Texas Rangers were losing again, and he was just about to order another drink when every TV in the bar switched to an emergency broadcast. "This is not a drill," the stern-faced news anchor said, her voice shaking slightly. "We have confirmed reports of multiple massive objects entering Earth's atmosphere. The president will address the nation in 5 minutes." Mike barely heard her over the sudden noise in the bar. Everyone was talking at once, some reaching for their phones, others moving closer to the TVs. He just sat there, taking another sip of his beer. After 15 years as a Marine Corps combat engineer and another 5 as a civilian contractor, he had learned that panic never helped anything. The objects appeared on screen. Massive black shapes descending through the clouds like dark mountains floating in the sky. They moved with impossible grace for their size, clearly controlled by some advanced technology. The largest one was shaped like a massive wheel with spokes running through it, easily the size of a small city. "Well, that's different," Mike muttered, squinting at the screen. Something about the way the wheel turned caught his attention. He'd seen movement like that before, but he couldn't quite place it. The president's address was brief and to the point. The aliens called themselves the Kraxan Empire. They demanded Earth's immediate surrender. Claiming resistance was pointless against their ultimate weapon, something they call the World Breaker. The military's response was immediate and completely useless. Mike watched as fighter jets launched missiles at the alien ships, only to see them explode harmlessly against some kind of energy shield. The massive wheel-shaped machine started to spin faster, its spokes glowing with an ominous purple light. "That can't be good," Bob Miller said, dropping onto the stool next to Mike. Bob was a fellow engineer who worked with Mike on military contracts. "You seen what I'm seeing?" Mike nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on the screen. The World Breaker was turning faster now, and the news helicopter providing the footage was getting an excellent view of its movement. "Look at the way it rotates," he said, pointing at the screen with his beer bottle. "See that slight wobble?" Bob leaned forward, squinting. "Yeah, now that you mention it. Looks almost like a bearing issue," they said together. The World Breaker fired its first shot. A beam of purple energy lanced out, cutting through 3 military bases like they were made of butter. The news cameras caught it all: the destruction, the panic, the seemingly unstoppable advance of alien technology. But Mike wasn't watching the destruction. He was watching the machine itself, the way it moved, the way its parts interacted. 15 years of fixing broken equipment in combat zones had given him an eye for mechanical problems. And this ultimate weapon had problems. His phone rang. It was Jessica Parker, his old friend from college who now worked as a lead scientist for the Earth Defense Force. "Mike, are you seeing this?" "Sure am, Jess. Quick question. You still have those high-level military contacts?" "Mike." Her voice had that warning tone he knew well. "Whatever you're thinking." "That thing's got design flaws," he interrupted. "Big ones. I've seen them before in heavy industrial equipment. It's just scaled up. And, well, alien." There was a long pause on the line. "You're drunk, aren't you?" "Only 3 beers in." "Come on, Jess. When have I ever been wrong about broken machinery?" "Do you want that list alphabetically or chronologically?" But he could hear the slight change in her voice. She was listening now. "What exactly are you seeing?" Mike looked up at the screen again, where the World Breaker was preparing for another shot. "You know how your car makes that funny noise when the timing belt's about to go? Their unstoppable death machine is making the space equivalent of that noise. Trust me, I've worked on enough equipment to know when something's not quite right." "And what exactly do you plan to do about it?" Mike finished his beer and set it down firmly on the bar. "First, I'm going to need my toolbox. The big one. Then I'm going to need you to get me and Bob clearance to take a real close look at that thing." He grinned. Because I'm pretty sure I can fix their world breaker. And by fix, I mean break it properly. The Earth Defense Force headquarters was chaos when Mike and Bob arrived. Jessica met them at the security checkpoint, her lab coat wrinkled and her hair messy from running her hands through it too many times. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. "You better be right about this," she said, handing them visitor badges. "I had to call in every favor I had just to get you in here." Mike patted the large red toolbox he was carrying. "When have I ever been wrong about broken machinery?" "Last month. My dishwasher. That wasn't broken, it was possessed. Totally different thing." They followed Jessica through crowded hallways, filled with rushing military personnel and worried-looking scientists. The main control room was packed with people staring at giant screens showing different views of the world breaker. General Davis, a tall man with gray hair and a permanent frown, turned to face them. "Dr. Parker, these are your experts." "Yes, sir," Jessica said. "Mike Thompson and Bob Miller. They're mechanical engineers with extensive field experience." The general looked at Mike's toolbox, then at the beer logo on Bob's hat. His frown got deeper. "You're telling me these two think they can find a weakness in the most advanced weapon humanity has ever seen?" "With all due respect, sir," Mike said, pointing at one of the screens, "that thing's not as advanced as it looks. See that movement there? That's a mechanical drive system, just like what we use in mining equipment, only bigger." He walked to the screen, setting his toolbox down with a heavy thunk. "Look at the way it turns. That wobble isn't supposed to be there. Something's not aligned right." Bob joined him at the screen. "He's right. And see those panels that slide open before it fires? They're using some kind of rail system. Probably got bearings, tracks, the whole deal." "Are you suggesting," the general said slowly, "that this alien superweapon works like Earth machinery?" "Physics is physics," Mike shrugged. "They might have fancy energy weapons and force fields, but at its core, that thing still needs to move parts from point A to point B. And moving parts mean mechanical problems." Jessica pulled up some sensor readings on another screen. "Our scans show intense heat buildup in several areas after each shot. We thought it was from the weapon charging." "Nah," Mike said, studying the heat map. "That's friction. Lots of it. Those parts aren't moving smooth like they should. Give it enough time, and something's gonna give." "We don't have time," the general cut in. "They're destroying our military bases one by one. In 2 days, they'll start on civilian targets." Mike opened his toolbox and pulled out a wrench. "Then let's not wait for it to break on its own. Those aliens think their machine is perfect, right? That they never had to deal with someone who actually knows how things break. You want to get close enough to sabotage it." The general looked like he was getting a headache. "Their shields stop missiles. What makes you think you can get through?" "Because they're not looking for something so simple," Bob said. "Their shields are designed to stop high-energy weapons and fast-moving objects. But what about a slow-moving shuttle? Something that looks like debris?" Mike grinned. "And once we're through, we find the maintenance access. Every machine needs maintenance, which means there's got to be a way in." "This is insane," Jessica said, but she was already typing on her tablet. The amount of things that could go wrong. "More than leaving that thing operational?" Mike asked. He held up his wrench. "Sometimes the simplest solution is the best one. And I've got a whole box of simple solutions right here." The general stared at them for a long moment. Around them, more alerts were coming in about another military base being destroyed. Finally, he nodded. "Dr. Parker, get them whatever they need. And God help us all." Mike looked at his wrench, then at the massive alien weapon on the screen. "Don't worry about God, sir. Worry about their warranty, because I'm about to void it." "This is the dumbest plan I've ever heard," Jessica said, staring at the whiteboard in the conference room. Mike had drawn a rough sketch of the world breaker, with arrows pointing to possible entry points. Next to it was a shopping list that included duct tape, WD-40, and a 6-pack of beer. "That's why it'll work," Bob said, adding more items to the list. Nobody would expect it, especially not aliens who think they're smarter than everyone else. Mike stood back from the whiteboard, marker in hand. Look, it's simple. We take a small shuttle, make it look like space junk, and drift right past their shields. They're looking for missiles and fighters, not garbage. The conference room was littered with empty coffee cups and fast food wrappers. They'd been planning for 6 hours straight, and the Earth Defense Force's best minds were running on caffeine and desperation. And the beer? Jessica asked, pointing at the list. Please tell me that's for after the mission. Nope. Need it for testing, Mike said. If I can't fix something while slightly drunk, the fix isn't good enough. That's been my rule since college. A young lieutenant burst into the room. Sir, the World Breaker just took out another base in Europe. They're moving faster than we predicted. Mike nodded. Then we better move faster. Jess, what have we got for a shuttle? Jessica pulled up some images on the room's main screen. We have an old maintenance shuttle, small enough to look like debris, big enough for your tools and a 2-person crew. Perfect, Mike said. Now, here's the real plan. See this part here? He pointed to a section of his drawing. That's where most of the heat's building up. Has to be some kind of main dry system. If we can get to that, we can jam it up good, Bob finished. Like that time we fixed the base's broken tank by breaking it in just the right way. The general walked in, looking even more tired than before. Please tell me you have something better than what I'm hearing about beer and broken tanks. Mike straightened up. Sir, we've got a solid plan. These aliens built a machine that's too perfect. And perfect machines don't exist. There's always a weak point, always a part that wears out faster than the others. He walked to the screen showing the World Breaker. See those panels? They're using standard mechanical principles. Gears, bearings, sliding mechanisms. They just made them bigger and added fancy energy weapons. But at its heart, it's still a machine. And every machine, Bob added, can be fixed. Or in this case, fixed good and proper. The general looked at Jessica. Dr. Parker, your professional opinion. Jessica sighed. Sir, it's crazy, but they're right about the mechanical systems. Our scans show familiar patterns. If they can get close enough, she shrugged. It might be our only shot. How long to prepare? The general asked. Give us 6 hours, Mike said. We need to modify the shuttle, gather supplies, and run through the plan one more time. He picked up his wrench. Oh, and we need to stop at the store. Can't void an alien warranty without the right tools. The general looked at the whiteboard, then at the World Breaker on the screen, then back at Mike and Bob. You have 4 hours. And if this works, I don't want to know about the beer. As the general left, Mike started packing his toolbox. Bob looked at the list again. Should we add more duct tape? Always add more duct tape, Mike said. And grab some zip ties too. If there's one thing I learned in the Marines, it's that you can fix anything with enough duct tape, zip ties, and bad ideas. Jessica watched them pack, shaking her head. I can't believe we're betting Earth's survival on 2 engineers with a toolbox and beer. Mike grinned. Sometimes the best solutions are the simple ones. Now, who's up for a spacewalk? The maintenance shuttle looked like garbage, which was exactly what Mike and Bob wanted. They had spent 2 hours attaching broken solar panels and bent metal pieces to make it look like space debris. Now they sat in the cockpit, checking their supplies one last time. Tools, Mike asked, going through their checklist. Check, Bob replied. Emergency oxygen. Check. Beer. Cold and ready. Jessica's voice came through their radio. I can't believe you actually brought beer into space. It's for science, Mike said, as the shuttle's engines warmed up. Besides, we need to keep up tradition. Can't say hold my beer without actual beer. The launch bay doors opened slowly above them. Through the gap, they could see the World Breaker floating in the night sky. its massive form blocking out the stars. It was getting ready to fire another shot. "Remember," Jessica said, "you've got one chance at this. Their sensors are focused on the ground. If they spot you—" "They won't," Mike said, starting the engines. "Trust me, these aliens are too proud. They don't even think we can reach them, let alone hurt their precious machine." The shuttle lifted off slowly, wobbling a bit for show. To anyone watching, it would look like a piece of debris from their earlier attacks, drifting harmlessly in space. Bob handled the controls while Mike studied the world breaker through binoculars. "There," he said, pointing. "See that panel? The one with the scratched paint? Bet you anything that's a maintenance access point." They drifted closer, playing dead whenever the alien ship's sensors swept past them. The world breaker was even bigger up close, its surface covered in moving parts and glowing energy lines. Mike could hear the machinery now through the shuttle's hull, a deep humming that didn't sound quite right. "Listen to that," he said. "Sounds like my old truck before the transmission went out." Bob nodded. "Yeah, and look at those seams. They're not sealed properly. Guess even aliens can't build a perfect machine." They were almost to the maintenance panel when alarms started blaring in the Earth Defense Force control room. Jessica's panicked voice came through their radio. "They're charging the main weapon. Get out of there." But Mike was grinning. "Perfect. Bob, get us closer. I want to see what happens when this thing fires." The world breaker's parts started moving faster. The whole machine turned slowly, aiming at another target on Earth. Energy built up in its core, making the purple glow brighter. "Mike," Bob said nervously. "Wait for it." Mike watched through his binoculars. "Just want to see. There." As the weapon fired, part of its outer ring jerked slightly. The movement was tiny, but Mike saw it. "Did you see that? The alignment's off. That's why it builds up so much heat." "Great," Bob said. "Can we go break it now, before it shoots anything else?" Mike grabbed his toolbox and put on his spacesuit. Time to go to work. "Hey Jess, hold my beer." "Literally. I'm leaving it in the shuttle." "Just hurry," Jessica said. "And please don't die. The paperwork would be awful." Mike opened the shuttle's airlock, safety line attached to his suit. The world breaker's surface was right there, close enough to touch. The maintenance panel was bigger up close, easily large enough for a person to fit through. "Would you look at that?" Mike said, examining the panel's edge. "They're using regular bolts. Different shape, but still just bolts." He pulled out his adjustable wrench. "Bob, get the toolbox ready. We're about to void the biggest warranty in human history." As Mike started working on the panel, Bob radioed Jessica. "Hey, when we get back, remind me to tell you about the time Mike fixed a tank with just a hammer and some bad language. This might be a lot like that." Mike cut the first bolt loose. Less talking, more working. These aliens are about to learn why you should always read the fine print about unauthorized repairs. Inside the world breaker, Mike and Bob found themselves in a massive service tunnel. Purple lights lined the walls, and the humming of machinery was much louder here. The tunnel stretched both ways, filled with pipes, cables, and what looked like giant gear systems. "Would you look at that?" Mike whispered, shining his flashlight on a nearby mechanism. "It's just like the inside of a big factory machine, only cleaner." Bob checked a small device Jessica had given them. "Temperature's highest that way." He pointed left. "That's got to be where the main drive system is." They moved carefully through the tunnel, their magnetic boots keeping them from floating away. Every few steps, Mike would stop and examine something, shaking his head and mumbling about over-engineered nonsense. "See this," he said, pointing at a massive gear assembly. They got 15 backup systems all connected to one main drive. One problem spreads to everything. He grinned, kind of like dominoes. Suddenly, the whole tunnel vibrated. The world breaker was turning again, getting ready for another shot. "Here's our chance," Mike said, pulling tools from his belt. "Watch that corner." Their maintenance robots might show up. He worked quickly, loosening key bolts just enough to create problems later. Bob handed him tools and kept watch, occasionally taking pictures to send back to Jessica. "You know what's funny?" Mike said, working on a particularly important-looking joint. "They made everything so complicated that they forgot the basics, like putting in enough grease fittings or making parts easy to reach." Through their radio, Jessica's voice crackled. "How's it going up there?" "The aliens are getting suspicious about that debris near their ship." "Almost done," Mike said. "Just need to." "There." He stepped back from his work. "Bob, hand me that tube of stuff you brought." Bob pulled out a small tube labeled Ultra Glide in English. "You sure about this? It's meant for heavy Earth machinery, not alien tech." "Physics is physics," Mike said, applying the lubricant to specific spots. "And friction is about to become their worst enemy." They heard a mechanical whirring from around the corner. Mike quickly shoved his tools back in his belt. "Maintenance drone," Bob whispered. They pressed themselves against the wall as a floating robot moved past their position. It looked like a metal spider with too many arms. The drone stopped near where Mike had been working, its sensors scanning the area. Mike held his breath, if it detected their changes. But the drone moved on, continuing its rounds. Once it was gone, both men let out deep sighs of relief. "See," Mike said, "they trust their machines so much, they don't even program them to check for sabotage. Bet they think no one could understand their technology enough to break it." The tunnel started vibrating again. This time, there was a new sound, a high-pitched whine that hadn't been there before. "That's our cue to leave," Mike said, gathering their remaining tools. "Things are about to get interesting." They hurried back the way they came, but Mike kept stopping to make small adjustments. A loosened bolt here, a misaligned component there. Each change was tiny, but together. "Like my old boss used to say," Mike explained as they reached their entry point. "Complex machines are like conspiracies. The more parts involved, the easier it is for something to go wrong." Just as they reached their shuttle, a deep grinding noise echoed through the world breaker. The purple glow flickered slightly. "What exactly did you do?" Bob asked as they closed the airlock. Mike strapped himself into the pilot's seat, added some lubricant where it shouldn't be, removed it from where it should be, and made sure all those backup systems will fail in just the right way. He started the engines. "Now we wait for the dominoes to fall." Jessica's voice came through again. "Whatever you did, their energy readings are going crazy. Get out of there." "With pleasure," Mike said, steering the shuttle away. Time to watch the show. From the safety of their shuttle, Mike and Bob watched as the world breaker prepared to fire again. The massive weapon turned slowly, its purple glow building up for another shot. But something was different this time. "Listen to that," Mike said, grinning. The deep hum of the machine now had a scratchy, grinding sound mixed in. "Sounds like a car with a bad timing belt." In the Earth Defense Force control room, Jessica and General Davis watched their sensor readings go crazy. "What's happening up there?" the general demanded. "If I had to guess," Mike's voice came through the radio. "About 30 seconds of panic, followed by total system failure." The world breaker's outer ring started spinning up to full power. Suddenly, there was a loud screech of metal on metal. The spinning slowed, then sped up again, then slowed. Purple energy sparked out in wrong directions. "What did you do to our weapon?" An angry alien voice boomed through all radio channels. It was the first time Bakraxon had spoken directly to anyone below their leader. "Me?" Mike answered innocently. "I just helped your maintenance systems along. Maybe added a little Earth-style efficiency." Bob turned on their shuttle's cameras to record everything. "You might want to check your warranty," he added. "Pretty sure it's void now." Inside the world breaker, alarms were blaring. The maintenance drones rushed around, trying to fix problems that kept multiplying. Every time they fixed one thing, 3 more would break. The lubricants spreading through their system, Mike explained to Jessica. Remember how I said all their backup systems were connected? Well, now they're all failing together. Like dominoes. A huge grinding noise echoed through space. The World Breaker's main weapon port tried to open but got stuck halfway. The purple glow turned red, then started flickering like a broken light bulb. You primitive! How dare you! The alien voice shouted. This is impossible. Our technology is perfect. That's your problem right there, Mike said, watching pieces of outer armor start to peel off the weapon. Nothing's perfect. The more complicated you make something, the more ways it can break. The World Breaker tried to fire, but instead of a deadly beam, it just made a sound like an old car trying to start in winter. More pieces started falling off. The spinning ring jerked to a stop, stuck at an odd angle. Should we get further back? Bob asked, watching bigger chunks of the weapon break away. Probably, Mike said, firing the shuttle's engines. That whole thing's about to shake itself apart. In the control room, Jessica watched the sensor readings drop. Their power system is failing. Whatever you did, it worked. The alien voice came back, but now it sounded scared. Emergency shutdown. Shut it all down. Too late, Mike said. Trying to stop it now will just make it worse. Trust me, I've seen this before, usually right before someone has to buy a new transmission. With a final devastating screech, the World Breaker's main ring broke apart. Pieces of the ultimate weapon scattered across space like expensive alien confetti. The purple glow died completely, leaving only emergency lights flickering across the dead machine. This is impossible, the alien voice said again, quieter this time. How did you, with primitive tools? Next time, Mike said, try building something simpler. And maybe add a few more grease fittings. The shuttle's radio crackled with Jessica's laughter. In the background, they could hear cheering from the control room. General Davis's voice cut through. Good work up there, though I don't want to know exactly how you did it. Probably better that way, sir, Mike agreed. Let's just say some problems don't need fancy solutions. Sometimes all you need is a wrench and some bad ideas. As they flew back to Earth, Bob looked at the floating pieces of the World Breaker. Think they'll try to fix it? Mike shook his head. Would you try to fix something after it failed that badly? Nah, that thing's officially beyond repair. Though I'd love to see them try to explain this to their insurance company. 3 days after the World Breaker became the World Broken, Mike sat in a meeting room at the United Nations, trying not to fall asleep. Politicians and military leaders from around the world had been talking for hours about what happened. So let me get this straight, said a French general, looking at Mike with disbelief. You defeated their ultimate weapon with a wrench and some machine oil. And duct tape, Bob added from his seat next to Mike. Don't forget the duct tape. Jessica, sitting on Mike's other side, kicked him under the table. She had spent the last 3 days trying to make their success sound more scientific in her reports. It wasn't working. On the large screen at the front of the room, news channels from around the world showed the same things. Pieces of the World Breaker falling into the ocean, celebration parties in cities, and angry alien leaders trying to explain what went wrong. The Cracksun Empire demands an explanation. The alien ambassador's hologram flickered in the center of the room. His green face was darker than usual, which Mike had learned meant he was embarrassed. How did you destroy our perfect weapon? Mike stood up, holding his favorite wrench. It wasn't perfect. That was the problem. You made it too complicated, with too many backup systems all connected together. One small problem became many big problems. But our engineers are the best in the galaxy, the ambassador protested. Maybe at designing things, Bob said. But when's the last time they actually fixed something with their own hands? The room went quiet. The ambassador's mouth opened and closed a few times, but no words came out. That's what I thought, Mike said. Your engineers forgot the first rule of machinery. Keep it simple. Everything breaks eventually. The more complicated it is, The worse the breakdown. A video started playing on the screen, footage from their mission that Bob had recorded. The aliens watched in horror as their mighty weapon fell apart piece by piece. Some of the human officials tried not to laugh. The Kraxun Empire's reputation will never recover from this, the ambassador said sadly. We were known throughout the galaxy for our unstoppable weapons. Now everyone will know we were defeated by a couple of guys with a toolbox, Mike suggested helpfully. And beer, Bob added. Don't forget the beer. Jessica put her face in her hands. Please stop helping. But the damage was done. Within hours, the story spread across the galaxy. News reports from other alien civilizations started coming in, talking about how the mighty Kraxun Empire had been defeated by human mechanics with basic tools. We're getting messages from 17 different alien races, a UN official announced, reading from his tablet. They all want to know more about human engineering practices. 3 of them want to hire our mechanics for their ships. Mike looked at the wrench in his hand, then at the hologram of the broken world breaker still floating in space. Maybe this is what we bring to the galaxy. Not fancy technology, but practical knowledge. The ability to look at a problem and fix it with whatever's available. Or break it properly, Bob said with a grin. The ambassador's hologram had been quiet for a while. Finally, he spoke. The Kraxun Empire would like to request assistance in properly maintaining our other machines. Perhaps we have become too dependent on automation and complexity. Mike smiled. Happy to help. First lesson's free. Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. And the second lesson? The ambassador asked. Always carry duct tape, Bob said. You never know when something needs fixing. Jessica finally smiled. I can't believe this is happening. We're going to end up teaching alien civilizations about mechanical engineering through dad jokes and basic tools. Could be worse, Mike said, putting his wrench back in his toolbox. At least we didn't have to explain why I needed the beer. The UN officials started discussing treaties and technology exchange programs, but Mike wasn't listening anymore. He was already thinking about all the alien machines out there, just waiting to be fixed. Or fixed good and proper. 6 months after the World Breaker incident, Mike Thompson found himself in a very strange situation. He was teaching a class about basic machine maintenance to a room full of alien engineers. Some had tentacles, others had multiple eyes, but all of them were taking careful notes as he held up a wrench. Remember, he said, pointing to the whiteboard behind him, if you can't fix it with basic tools, you've probably designed it wrong. In the back of the classroom, Bob was helping a blue-skinned alien figure out how to use a screwdriver. The alien had 4 arms, which should have made it easier, but somehow made it more complicated. No, Bob said patiently. You're thinking too hard. It's righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Doesn't matter how many hands you've got. The Galactic Council had made new rules after the World Breaker disaster. All war machines now had to be human-proof, meaning they had to be simple enough that a human with basic tools couldn't break them. This turned out to be harder than anyone expected. Jessica walked into the classroom, carrying a tablet with more news. The Kraxun Empire just failed another safety test, she announced. Their new defense system got taken apart by a plumber from Ohio with nothing but a pipe wrench. Mike grinned. See, he told his alien students, this is why we're studying the basics. Complexity isn't always better. One of the alien engineers raised a tentacle. But how do we make advanced weapons if we have to keep them simple? That's the point, Mike said. Maybe we shouldn't be making things just to blow each other up. How about we build things that help people instead? The idea spread across the galaxy. More aliens came to Earth to learn about human engineering. They were amazed by simple things like bicycles, hand tools, and especially duct tape. Earth became known as the place where practical solutions were born. Mike and Bob opened a special school, the Keep It Simple Space School. They taught aliens and humans together, sharing both Earth knowledge and alien technology. Their first rule was that everyone had to fix things themselves. No using robots or automated systems. "You know what's funny?" Bob said one day, watching a group of students excitedly learn about WD-40. "We probably did more for galaxy peace by breaking their weapon than any war could have done." Mike nodded, looking at his classroom full of different species working together. A group in the corner was trying to figure out how to change a car's oil, while another was learning about bicycle repair. It was weird, but it worked. Even the Kraxon Empire changed. They became known for making reliable, easy-to-fix machines instead of complicated weapons. Their new slogan was simple enough for a human to fix, strong enough for a galaxy to use. Jessica got promoted to head of Earth's new Galactic Engineering Exchange program. She still didn't approve of Mike and Bob's teaching methods, especially when they included their famous "hold my beer" demonstrations. But she couldn't argue with the results. "Just got word from the council," she told them one evening. "They're making basic human engineering a required course for all alien engineering degrees. You two are about to get a lot busier." Mike looked at his old toolbox, now covered in stickers from different alien worlds. Not bad for a couple of guys who just wanted to fix things. "Or break them properly," Bob added with a laugh. The final piece of the world breaker was turned into a statue outside their school. Under it, a simple plaque read, "Sometimes the best solution is the simplest one. And sometimes you just need a good wrench." As Mike walked past the statue that evening, he saw an alien student trying to explain to his family how humans had defeated the mighty Kraxon Empire. "But where were their big weapons?" the alien child asked. "They didn't need them," the student answered. "They had something better, common sense and basic tools." Mike smiled and patted his trusty wrench. Sometimes the best way to change the galaxy wasn't with fancy weapons or complicated plans. Sometimes all you needed was the right tool and the knowledge of how to use it, or misuse it creatively.